In May of 1999, in Krakow, Poland, an elderly grandfather would sit down to breakfast with his son. His son would begin acting very strangely, altering his voice and just twisting up his face. His jaw seemed to drop and just kind of swing independently from his face. The old man didn't know what to think of it. It was just too bizarre. A few moments later, the grandfather would make a discovery in the home that his son and his grandson shared that was so gruesome and so horrific, so disgusting that it would traumatize the country for years to come. Hello strangers and strangelings. Today I have a story so bizarre and twisted I almost didn't want to tell you about it. I was checking out another channel called Asinine Asylum, and he recently covered a case similar to this one actually. And the story just really drew me in, and it kind of jogged my memory of this story, which he actually mentions in that story, because we're kind of tied together somewhat. So go make sure to check out his video after you watch this one. I'll leave a link in the description for you. I won't tell you what the video is or what it's about, because then you'll know kind of what this story is about, but you'll know which one it is when you see it. But before we get into today's story, if you like strange true crime and storytelling, then this is the place to be, right here with me, JP. So kick back, grab a drink and a snack, and make sure to tip that like button. Join that SBG family by subscribing and hitting that notification bell to make sure you're notified when I release a weekly video. All right guys, let's go. It was just another typical, normal morning in Poland. A grandfather would sit down at a public bench to meet with his son. Him and his son enjoyed spending time together in the fresh air and just catching up with each other. It was just something nice that they would do with each other in the mornings. Normally, his grandson would join for these quick outings, but he was apparently busy and couldn't join this one. The old man understood. He was young once, and ultimately the old man was spending time with his son, so he didn't mind too much. The old man and his son talked about their plans for the day, what they had going on later that week, and eventually the two got hungry and decided to head back to the son's home that he shared with his son, the old man's grandson, making him a grandfather, of course, to eat breakfast, basically. This is something that was routine for them. They'd meet up, have a little chat, a little stop and chat, and they go make breakfast and share breakfast with one another. Now, the old man had very bad vision, so he would need some assistance. So of course it took a little patience, but eventually they made it back to the son's home. There they continued to talk some more, and something just seemed off. Grandpa just thought something seemed weird. Something just wasn't quite right about his son. His son's face would contort in ways he's never seen before. His son's voice sounded distorted. Maybe he had a cold, or was it something else? I mean, this is his son. He knows when his kid is sick. Something else just seemed weird and off about his son today. So the old man excused himself from the table, and something just told him, you know, go look around the house. Well, something's not right here. And eventually the grandfather made his way down the stairs and into the cellar. What he saw in the cellar would hunt him for the rest of his life. It would hunt me as well, because I accidentally came across the gruesome photos of this case, and you do not want to see these photos, and I urge you not to Google them. I warned you. If you want to sleep with the lights on, then hey, be my guest, but I warned you. But back to the story. But upon witnessing the horrifying scene in the cellar, the old man panicked. He raced back upstairs, kind of fumbling into things, but ultimately he made his escape. His heart was racing, just beating through his chest. He ran to a neighbor's house and contacted the police. At this point, the old man's son, he realized he was caught and he had to act quickly. So he actually went downstairs into the cellar. He saw the horrifying scene that his father had witnessed. He didn't pay it any mind though, of course, but instead he just grabbed some clothes, he ran, he hid, and he watched the investigation from a hiding spot. He watched as the police showed up. He watched as the police would survey the area, survey the property. After a while, he just kind of got bored watching them, and he just left. And he eventually walked to a bus stop, and at that bus stop there was a little bench, and he sat at the bench. And of course, he didn't seem all that concerned. He just kind of sat and waited. And the police eventually found him at this bus stop and arrested him. And it was all over. He was sentenced to 25 years and end of story. Who was the man that the grandfather discovered in the cellar? The son, or the presumed killer in this case, lived with his son, which would be the old man's grandson. Could the father have murdered his son? But that deceased man in the cellar wasn't the grandson. So who was he and how did he get down there? And where the hell's the grandson? Would you believe me if I said the grandson was there the whole time? The father was there the whole time? And of course, the grandfather, the old man, was there the whole time. Would you believe me? Well, let me explain. Vladimir W, we'll call him, age 26 at the time. This is the grandson in the story, was just a man who lived with his father. And his father was the old man's son that we were referring to at the beginning here. And again, on a very typical, regular, normal night, something strange would happen and would change everything forever. Vladimir would come up with an excuse to lure his father downstairs into the cellar. Curious, the father followed. Once in the cellar, Vladimir attacked his father. He first attempted to incapacitate his father by electrocuting him with a stun gun, but he missed because he's a horrible shot, and of course, he's a freaking idiot. His father attempted to escape. When Vladimir's attack failed, Vladimir struck again, but this time he wouldn't miss. Armed with a sharpened screwdriver, the young man repeatedly stabbed his father in the chest and throat. His father died on the cellar floor, but Vladimir was not done yet. His ultimate goal wasn't just murder. That was just the first step in this madness, in this crazy ass story. The next step was a bit more difficult. He grabbed his father's corpse and hung him up by his legs in the cellar window. He splayed his arms to either side of his body, his head touching the ground. According to Vladimir, the reason he hanged his father's body in this way was deliberate. He wanted his hanging to resemble a crucifixion on an upside down cross. He said that the head of this kind of scoundrel should not hang even on a devil's cross. Having finished his crucifixion, the killer moved on to the next step of his process. He used a surgical scalpel and a shovel to decapitate his father's head. Then he made deep incisions into the tissue in the back of the kneecap, that kind of soft, hollow tissue that you have in the back of your kneecap. Now, there was a word for that, and I'm not gonna even try to sound it out for you guys. Popliteal fossa. No, we're not doing that today. It's the tissue on the back of the kneecap, the soft tissue. But ultimately, he did that to drain the body of blood. Vladimir placed buckets beneath his father's body to collect that blood. The second part of his plan was finished. And we're not done. This gets more bizarre, more crazy, and more strange. This is just step 2 on his horrific plan. So let's recap here. He murdered his father, he decapitated him, so he has one more step remaining. And that final step is to create a mask. Yeah, to create a fucking mask. So he took his father's decapitated head upstairs, and Vladimir went to his bedroom and he got down to work. He worked through the night, taking no breaks, and using what I presume would be the same scalpel that he used to actually remove his father's head. Vladimir then separated the skin from his father's skull. Once he finished, he tossed the victim's skull into the garden. And in Vladimir's mind, by tossing the skull into the garden, he was throwing away the weed and freeing the body from the presence of the head. Vladimir ultimately claimed that the head was guilty of everything, so he was doing the body a service. And we're gonna get into that, his problem with his father here. But using some simple thread, he sutured the skin back together. He used like a prosthetic plastic, like kind of round mask, like a little hump, almost like those kind of reminds me of like those little mannequin heads that they used to like learn how to do hair and stuff on, I guess. But he used that plastic mask as like a base to give the skin form while he kind of worked on it and kind of stitched, the pieces of skin back together. When he finally finished reconnecting the soft tissue, Vladimir had to work quickly. When left in the air for too long, the skin would begin the process of like rotting and decaying. So in order to prevent this process from starting, he applied salts on the skin, and he also would shave the hair off the skin. His creation was complete. He had made a mask using the face of his father. He slid the mask over his face, but he still wasn't quite done being a freaking weirdo, being a freaking nut, being a disgusting, vile human being. This mask was simply part of a larger, even more disturbing endgame. Following the creation of this mask, Vladimir made his way into his father's room. He grabbed some of his father's clothing, including his hat, glasses, and scarf. He then left his house and sat on the bench that he would meet his grandfather in the mornings at. And of course, wearing that mask, he sat there and waited for his grandfather to arrive. Vladimir, wearing the skin mask of his father, wanted to play a little game with his grandfather. Acting as his father, the victim, Vladimir started a conversation with his grandfather. He wanted to see if his grandfather would recognize him. The grandfather, who had failing eyesight, believed the man sitting on the bench to be his actual son. He looked just like him. Seemed a little off, but everything was kind of blurry. They had a conversation, which eventually led back to their home. The two even ate breakfast together, and at some point during the conversation, the grandfather realized something wasn't right. The grandfather noticed the killer's voice was distorted. After all, it was hard trying to speak through the skin mask's mouth. It didn't quite match up with Vladimir's. The grandfather started investigating. He would search all through the house, going room to room. All the while, Vladimir would just look at him, studying him, thinking in his mind, I wonder what Grandpa's thinking. I wonder what my grandfather's thinking as he seems like he's onto me. And the old man would continue to search, and he eventually made his way downstairs into the cellar. It was there when all hell broke loose. The grandfather found his real son, or at least his real son's body, hanging upside down near the cellar window, without a head. And of course, the grandfather would panic, fly back up the stairs, knocking into things, ultimately make it to his neighbor's house and contacting the police. And Vladimir would grab his things and flee the house. He would watch as the police conducted a investigation at his home and found his father's body. And of course, he would ultimately be caught at a bus stop, sitting on a bench with his father's face on his face, just hanging out, chilling, and waiting for the cops to come get him. Vladimir was a sick piece of trash. Ultimately, Vladimir was put on trial for his crimes. Although Vladimir didn't believe he actually committed any crime at all. Like, he actually admitted to the murder, but he phrased it differently. He claimed the murder shouldn't be viewed as some graphic, revolting act. That's the most graphic, revolting shit I've seen or heard and seen, because I've came across the pictures on accident. But he says it shouldn't be viewed as some graphic, revolting act. Rather, it should be seen as a work of art illustrating extreme human meanness. He then went on to say that it was an act with no holds barred. The end game had finally been revealed. To Vladimir, his father wasn't some helpless victim who had been brutally murdered. Rather, he was deserving of his punishment. Vladimir testified that the reason behind all of it, the murder, the mask, everything, was for revenge. He hated his father. Vladimir's father lived an immoral life, according to Vladimir. His father had taken him away to Poland, leaving behind his sister and mother. He was fleeing from his own actions, according to Vladimir. His father had seduced a woman 30 years younger than him, a woman that was also the daughter of one of the father's friends. When he was caught, he didn't want to face the consequences of his actions and fled to Poland. According to Vladimir, you can't believe shit this dude's saying, he's a nut. Once in Poland, his father, who was quite wealthy, refused to help his wife and his daughter. So refused to help Vladimir's mom and his sister. All of this resulted in anger so intense, it drove Vladimir to take the life of his father. He wanted to see if his grandfather would recognize him if he was wearing the mask of his father. To Vladimir, this aspect was some experiment to test out a morbid curiosity. He listed his main inspiration as the killer from the movie Seven. In this movie, the killer permanently disfigured the face of a woman he considered to be prideful. But most importantly, the killer in this movie sacrificed himself, punished others. The son claimed that a man's worth can be recognized in his values rather than on his face. By scalping his father, or a man who never recognized any values, according to Vladimir, Vladimir wanted to symbolize his father's lack of face. And that was a quote by him, his lack of face. Psychiatrists ultimately diagnosed Vladimir with borderline schizoid personality disorder. This mental disorder is characterized by unusual perceptions, superstitious beliefs, emotional detachment, and solitariness. According to Article 34.2 of Polish Penal Code, this mental disorder sets considerable limitations on his capacity to understand the meaning of the offense and the ability to guide his behavior. Although he was diagnosed with this mental disorder, it remains unknown as to whether or not the killer was declared as legally insane. And from my research, what I've seen, he got 25 years in prison. So only 25 years. So this happened in 1999. You do the math. This guy should not be walking around. This guy's sick. Now, I don't know if they have the death penalty in Poland or how that works, if they even do life in prison in Poland or how that works, but this guy is a danger to society. He should not be able to walk around free after what he's done. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think of this story in the comment section. This is a wild one, and like I said, do not Google the, and this is not like me saying don't do something because I want you to do it. I do not want you to do it. I care about your fucking mental health. Don't do it. I accidentally clicked on some stuff that I should not have clicked on. Those pictures are horrible. I find it strange because Poland won't release Vladimir W's last name, but the picture's all over the net, so I don't know what's going on there, guys. But anyway, guys, if you guys like this story, if this is your first time checking out my channel, make sure to like, subscribe, and join that SBG family. I do release 1 to 2 times weekly, so join the family, watch some videos, and let's discuss. I like getting your guys' feedback and discussing these things with you guys, so let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But be safe, be good, and do not Google those fucking pictures.